Good morning. Thank you for joining the Northern Virginia Technology Council and the Consumer Technology Association for our virtual Masters of Leadership Series event. Please welcome Rich Montoni, the Chairman of NVTC and the Vice Chairman of Maximus.
Well, good morning all. I am delighted to welcome you to our virtual event today. We have an exciting program with U.S. House Majority Whip James Clyburn and Consumer Technology Association President and Chief Executive Officer Gary Shapiro. First, before we get started, I have a few housekeeping matters. Everyone has been muted. During the question and answer portion, if you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A button to write your question for the speakers. It is located in the middle of the bottom bar on your screen. This series is made possible by our co-producer, Consumer Technology Association, our premier sponsors, CoreSite and SAP, and our support sponsors. They include Amazon Web Services, American Systems, CGI Federal, CNSI, Cressa, Iridium, Micron Technology, Morgan Stanley, NTT Data, Raymond James and Associates, Transformation Systems Inc., and Verite Group Inc., also known as VGI. Thank you for all your support. If you would like to join them as a sponsor, please connect with Yolanda Lee at NVTC today. The next two events in this series will be on Friday, July 7th, with the Heritage Foundation President Kay Coles James, and on July 29th, we will have Best Buy Chief Executive Officer Corey Berry, and that will happen at 2 p.m. Registration is open for these events on the NVTC website. Now, it is my honor to introduce today's moderator, Gary Shapiro. He is a NVTC board member and is President and Chief Executive Officer of the Consumer Technology Association. CTA is the U.S. trade association representing more than 2,200 consumer technology companies, in which owns and produces CES, the global stage for innovation. It is through his New York Times best-selling books, television appearances, and as a columnist whose more than 1,000 opinion pieces have appeared in publications such as the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, that Gary has helped direct policymakers and business leaders on the importance of innovation in the U.S. economy. He is considered an influencer on LinkedIn and has more than 300,000 followers. Please welcome Gary Shapiro.
Thank you, Rich, and thanks to the NVTC, and especially to Bobby Kilberg, who's, I think this is her last formal session as president and CEO of the NVTC. What a great enterprise you built, Bobby. Thank you. And also the great team at NVTC who's helped put this together. Now, this is indeed a pleasure to me because Congressman Clyburn is so special and has done so many amazing things I can't begin to say, but I will say that he has an incredible book out. It was a disappointment to end it because it ended. It talks about his life. It's an autobiography and all the amazing things that he's done. He's held so many jobs. He's the highest ranking African-American in Congress. He's the #3 person, U.S. House Majority Whip. And he's just done a phenomenal job in terms of being the first in so many areas, but being fair and judicious and balanced and willing to work. And this is a leadership series. So I want to talk about leadership, but Congressman, in the limited time you have with us, I want to cover a wide variety of areas, but I want to start out with more of an open question. And given the recent events of the last couple of months, what would your 20-year-old self be most surprised about today?
Thank you very much for having me. And thanks to you, Tiffany, all the rest of your team for the tremendous insight you all have given me over the years. Every time my daughter Mignon comes back from your big to-do out there on the West Coast, she tells me why I should have gone. And so I'm looking forward to hopefully things get to the new normal and maybe I can attend sometimes. When I think about what's going on today and my background and experience, I think about growing up in the little town of Sumter. My father was a fundamentalist minister, my mother a beautician who was very, very active in the NAACP. And we grew up in a pretty closely knit family, dealing with the here and now as opposed to life after death. But my dad focused very much on the here and now. He kept 3 books in his pulpit: the Bible that he read often, the hymnal that he could not sing from, but he also kept a little book that he put together. It was a list of registered voters in the precinct that we lived in. And he would talk to me often about leadership. He was absolutely developing me for leadership. But I think he thought it was going to be in the church. And so when I went over to school, thinking that I would spend 4 years at South Carolina State and go on to the seminary, after around the 3rd year at South Carolina State, and I started participating in sit-ins, going in and out of jail, I went home to tell him that I had changed my mind and I didn't think I was going to the seminary. My dad said to me on that occasion, "Well, son," he said, "I suspect the world would much rather see a sermon than to hear one." And with that, I set out upon my life's work, trying to make sure that people saw in my life a good, productive sermon. And throughout all of that, I always remember one fundamental that he taught me over and over again. And he would always say to me, "Son, you lead by precept and example. You just don't pronounce a precept. You live that precept. Be an example." And that's how leadership is. So when all of this started to happen, I thought about those days spent sitting in, marching. When I first met John Lewis, October 1960, on the campus of Morehouse College, when we were having our second meeting of what became known as the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC. John and I often talk today about how that movement got hijacked. We were doing a lot of good, positive things, challenging the status quo. We sat in at lunch counters. We waded in. We did things to break down barriers, getting off the back of the bus. And then we woke up one morning and the big headline was, "Burn, baby, burn." That hijacked the movement. And we still talk about that. And so I have been working very diligently throughout this effort. When I saw what was happening around the country, the reaction to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, I saw an opportunity for us to pick up where we left off in the 1960s and really complete the task of making this country's greatness accessible and affordable for all of its citizens. And so I spoke out against this new slogan, the hijacking attempt of this new movement, defund the police. I just wish I had someone sitting here in the Congress and other places throughout city and county governments who I could go to back in the 60s and get some response from. Today, there is someone sitting, and there are a lot of someones sitting in the Congress, in city and county councils, trying to provide leadership and there to receive the benefit of any requests for guidance. And so what I've been doing and what I feel strongly about is making sure that young people today get the benefit of that experience. That's what my book is all about, Blessed Experiences. And I say in that book that all my experiences have not been pleasant, but I consider all of them to be blessings. and I try to share those blessings with others. I don't want to see this effort get hijacked by sloganeering. I want to see what's coming together with business, with government, moving once again to fulfill the promise of this country. And that's why I'm trying to do what I'm doing.
Well, thank you. That's very powerful. And just back to your father for a second, and because this is about leadership, one of the things that he did, which impressed me, and you said impressed you, was that when he was running for Church of God president, and he presided over the vote, and he wasn't going to vote unless it was a tie, and it ended up being a tie, and he ended up voting for his opponent and shocked everyone. And that was a big move, and he said they will want me back, and he ended up being right. But a lot of what you've done, and I don't know if it came out of this in other lessons, is you've reached across the aisle, you've reached out, you've been a leader that's always been willing to talk to people that even disagree with you on other issues. Is that the lesson there?
Yeah, it is why when I was first elected in our caucus, you run for these so-called special committees like appropriations. When I got elected to the appropriations committee, I stepped off of it, and it shocked everybody, including my good friend Senator Fritz Hollins. In fact, when I did it, he publicly said he didn't understand what I was thinking about. We worked all these years to get someone from South Carolina back on the Appropriations Committee. Nobody had been there since Carol Campbell was on the Appropriations Committee from South Carolina, and I stepped off of it. Well, I stepped off of it because I learned a lesson from my dad when he voted for his opponent when he was running for re-election to be president of our church's Presbytery. He said to me at that time, when things are this divided, nobody can really lead. You need to step back. They would probably want me back, he said. And they did. They came back to him, and he stayed there until he retired, and they asked him not to retire when he did. So I did the same thing. I thought about that when Dick Gephardt was laying out a procedure in our caucus that I knew would divide our caucus in such a way we might not recover from it. And I told him what I thought his decision would lead to. He asked me if I had a better idea. And I said, yes, I do. And he said, what is it? I said, you can have my seat. I'll step off the committee so you can have this seat that will solve this problem. And he said, will you really do that? I said, yes, I would. So long as I get a good response to this page-and-a-half memorandum I'm going to send you. And I sent him the memorandum. I did get a good response, and the rest is history. But I don't know if I would have ever done that if I did not have that experience with my dad on that Saturday afternoon in that little church in Darlington, South Carolina. So yes, I learned a lot from my dad.
Yeah, and you've also, I know, in your career, you've been able to take a situation and come up with a third alternative. You certainly did that when you were running to be president of the freshman class, and the two finalists were you and another African-American member of Congress, and you came out with a way of splitting it. I've also seen you do it in terms of how you resolved other issues that have confronted you involving the Confederate flag. You actually did your research and found out that what we call the Confederate flag really wasn't the Confederate flag. It was a naval flag.
That's right.
You also learned from your mother, who was a beautician and entrepreneur. She also got a college degree, and she had to choose between the two, but she said, I'm not choosing, I'm doing both. And she had a customer ask you about your dream. And your dream was that you wanted to go into public service and be a politician and make the world better. And her customer responded very negatively to that, and your mother gave you some advice. What was that advice?
My mom said to me on that day, when a lady that she grew up with in a Jason farm in little Lee County, South Carolina, named for Robert E. Lee, by the way. When I came home from school that day, my mother had a rule that we all had to stop in the beauty shop to announce that things are going well for the day. And when I stepped in that particular day, this lady that she had grown up with looked at me and says, how much, sort of explained how much I had grown. And she just asked a question that everybody asked in those days. What do you want to be when you grow up? And I started telling her I'm going to finish high school, I was going to college, and I was going to get involved in politics and government. Because I had started studying Harry Truman in my pre-teen years. And so I just wanted to do what Harry Truman did, overcome the kind of odds that he overcame. And that lady looked at me that day and said, son, don't you ever let anybody else hear you say that again. Well, she knew what the experiences that Black people had in politics in Little Lee County and throughout the South. And she wasn't trying to throw cold water on my dreams. What she was trying to say to me was, if you've got those kinds of dreams and aspirations, you better keep them to yourself. But that night when my mother closed the beauty shop, she called me to the kitchen table and she said, James, don't you pay any attention to what that lady said to you today. You hold on to your dreams, you study hard, stay out of trouble. You'll be able to fulfill those dreams. And that's what I thought about today. I was sworn into Congress, fulfilling the dream I had since my days studying Harry Truman. And it has made all the difference. And even today, I find myself thinking about moms who finished college while she was running that beauty shop. She did it all in 3 years and took that degree, that diploma, and hung it on the wall in the beauty shop. And I asked her, why has she done that? She said, because I always wanted a college degree, but I'm going to still run this business. And when my mother went on to have not just one beauty shop, but 2 beauty shops and about 16 operators. She's a very successful businesswoman, but never used that college degree to do anything more than learn how to deal with the public.
So I want to stay on that just for a second, because you say in the book that Emily and I were both fortunate to have grown up in 2-parent households. At that time, 3 out of 4 African Americans were growing up in 2-parent households.
Right.
Today, it's about 1 out of 4. And now I don't want to say that, I mean, there's a lot of great people, including many on my staff, who grew up in a 1-parent household. But why is there a generational difference? What's happened? What have we done wrong in a sense of society or as America? And how can we fix that?
Well, I wish I knew the answer to that question. The fact of the matter is, tolerance is not today what it used to be. I remember when I was growing up, divorce was the last thing that anybody would think about. Today, it seems to be the first thing that people think about when something goes wrong. Emily and I stayed married for 58 years. And I'll always believe it is because divorce was the last thing that we ever thought about. And what I see today, as I said earlier, people seem to feel the first time there's a challenge, you walk away from it. And so we are in a soundbite world. Technology is a great thing. When I was elected chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, I set out to make my caucus very cognizant of technology. I took the first delegation, according to what was told me in New York, when we took the whole Congressional Black Caucus to Wall Street. And I think there's a picture in the book of me ringing the bell, opening up the session there. I took the entire caucus out to California, to the Silicon Valley. Took them to the Northern Virginia corridor, technology corridor, because I wanted them to get in tune with what I knew we were headed for. But that same technology has been so good in so many instances, we have not met all the challenges. And one of the things is we have devolved, and I say devolved, it may be evolved, but to me, devolved into a soundbite world. And we tend to react to the sound bites rather than thinking through whatever the situation might be. How many times we find ourselves today having to apologize for reacting to the sound bite rather than look behind the sound bite to see whether or not there may be something lacking in substance or some substance that need to be added to it. And it happens in the home, in families. And so I think we're going through this. I think we'll get through it. And I think the families of the future will be different in that the kinds of things that we walked away from, people are walking toward these days. And so the 21st century family is going to be totally different than the 19th and early 20th century family. And I think it's because we're going to work through all of these traditional things to accept the new kinds of families that will keep people together rather than driving them apart.
Yeah, another big value is education. You and your two brothers started school early. You had a very strong mother that made sure that happened. And you also yourself, you missed graduating college on time because you were involved with other activities, but you went. You became a teacher, you taught history, but you also took on the toughest kids, and you also worked with kids that had perhaps the ability but not the money or the direction. And you got over 400 younger poor kids into college. You also were the one who started the Boys and Girls Club in South Carolina, Boys and Girls Club we support. We're very happy to do that as an association. And also my favorite charity is the Ron Brown Scholar Program, which takes the top graduates, valedictorians, and make sure they get a great college education and a scholarship and mentoring along the way with 99% success rate. But education is something which is still in the news. On Friday, the Trump administration said that they are not going to require a college education for a certain information technology work, that the apprenticeship program that they've pushed, and with Democrats as well, have pushed very hard, is now, it's one of the things IBM has been behind. We've been behind as an organization trying to get apprenticeships. How can we improve our educational system so that everyone has an equal opportunity?
I'm really glad that you raised that. I was just thinking this morning that I finally found something that I could agree with this administration, and that's it. The fact of the matter is, I have been saying to my caucus for almost 20 years that we have to learn that we have to broaden our discussion of education. I cringe when I hear people saying you must be able to earn enough money to send your kids to college. No, you have to be able to send your kids to post-secondary education. It may not be a liberal arts college. When we think of college, we immediately think of liberal arts. We have to think more broad than that. And let me give you an example. I often talk about an experience I had at a Job Corps Center in a little town of Bamberg, South Carolina, in my congressional district. I went down there at their invitation one day to do a Black History Month speech. They asked me to come early so that I could be taken on a tour of the facility and get an appreciation for what they were doing there. And as we were going on the tour, we came upon a group of students who were having a little discussion. You might call it an argument about which one of them was being trained in the profession or the vocation that was most important to society. And I listened as one of them being trained as a plumber was talking about how important it was to be a plumber. Another one was arguing how important it was to be an automobile mechanic. One was being trained in the culinary arts. And I stood there and eavesdropped on that conversation for a little bit. So when I got to that auditorium that day, I took that little well-researched Black History Month speech I had I folded it up and I put it in my pocket. And I said to them in the auditorium that day, I shared with them what I had just heard in the hallways of that facility. And I said to them, I said, when I stop back to Columbia today and something happens in my automobile, I'm not going to call a doctor. I'm going to call an automobile mechanic. If I get up in the morning to turn on my water faucet and no water comes out, I'm not going to call a lawyer. I'm going to call a plumber. The most important person to me at that particular juncture in my life would be the plumber. And I close by saying to them, doctors need plumbers. Plumbers need lawyers. Lawyers need automobile mechanics. We all need each other, and no one of us is any more important than the other. Our importance to society is based upon what time it is, what the circumstances are. And I feel very strongly about that. And so I'm glad that this administration is going to focus on that, because I really believe that if I were, when I was teaching history in the public schools of Charleston, South Carolina, if I could earn as much money as the plumber earned who put my facilities in my house that I built down there, I might still be teaching. The fact of the matter is, we have to learn that people should be valued by the fulfillment of their dreams and aspirations rather than what we may superimpose upon them. And so if someone grows up wanting to be a plumber or an electrician or a landscaper or a carpenter or a bricklayer, whatever that person wants to do, we must make it possible for them to fulfill those dreams and those aspirations and demonstrate by the pay that they are important to society. So I'm glad that here we are in the fourth year, and I finally found something I can agree with this administration.
And I like what you said. I use it tonight with my wife is in healthcare, and says when someone's sick on a plane, no one says, "Is there a lawyer available?"
That's right.
This is a time of uncertainty for the country, and a lot of the business executives in office are dealing with a lot of different issues right now, just trying to survive, keep their businesses, keep their employees, give them some sense of normalcy or some future. And making a decision in a time of uncertainty is something that that I want to go back to your mother if I can. When Mignon, I know her as a wonderful FCC commissioner, amazingly not only smart but personable and open to new ideas. When she was born, your mom said to you, "When are you going to get a real home?" And you said, "I'll get one when you said, I'll get one when I can see my way clear."
Yeah.
And she said, "Son, let me tell you something. If you wait until you can see your way clear before attempting anything, you will never get anything done." Could you talk about that in the context of the decisions we all face now with the coronavirus, with race relations, with how do we move forward and get things done when people are well-intended, as Tiffany always tells me, they have good intentions, but they want to do the right thing. And especially I'd ask for advice for business executives in terms of race relations, because I think almost every American is well-intentioned here, but they just don't know what to do right.
That's a very good question. I tend to, when my mother told me that was, might have been the Mignon's first Christmas. Mignon was born in the month of March, and I think my mom's had come to Charleston during the Christmas holidays, and we invited her to dinner. And that night, after dinner, she asked Emily to excuse the two of us, and we went back into my apartment, the extra room we had in the apartment was a bedroom that we didn't have any money to buy furniture for. And we stood in that room, and she said to me, that son, your family is growing, you need to get out of this apartment and put them in a house and make a real home. And I said, yes, Mom, I'm gonna do that just as soon as I can see my way clear. And she told me, if you wait until you can see your way clear before you attempt anything, you will never get anything done. I reflected on that as I was writing this book, And then I thought about what my dad would have said. He would have probably referred me to Hebrew, the 11th chapter, the first verse, faith, the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. I really learned a lot from that discussion with my mother. Really, I say to people today, I know how dark and dreary things can sometimes look, sometimes seem. But I really believe that most people are, in fact, well-intentioned. I think that most people who are challenged by circumstances tend to respond in a well-intended way. But not enough people have the intestinal fortitude to fight through obstacles that may be placed in their way. Not enough people understand those little fundamentals that many of us learned early on, that when stumbling blocks are put in your way, turn them into stepping stones. These little things that people just may not have had the kinds of experiences that will allow them to take these challenges on and fight through them. And so as we look at what's going on in this country today, you never see it. You have to stay focused, and you have to stay in pursuit. That's why you see a turtle here on my wall that I keep right above my head. And that the caption under that turtle is, "Behold the turtle. He makes progress only when he sticks his neck out." If the turtle keeps his neck under the shell, feet under the shell, may be protected to some extent, but will never make any progress. And so that's my favorite reptile, the turtle. It may be my favorite non-human thing, is the turtle, because I think we have to sometimes get beyond what I call our comfort zone. Let's take somebody that everybody here, especially in technology, would know about, Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison, according to all of our studies, is the person that gave us the light bulb. That's 50% correct. When Thomas Edison was doing all of his experiments up there in New Jersey, he could get the light bulb to come on, but he couldn't get it to stay on. And it was not until someone approached Thomas Edison and told him about a guy up in Boston, Massachusetts named Lewis Latimer, who had come up with invented something called a filament. When Thomas Edison, the white guy, was able to get outside of his comfort zone and go up to Boston and find Lewis Latimer, the black guy, the son of former slaves who had escaped to Massachusetts. And he got Lewis Latimer's filament to put into his light bulb. That's how he got the light bulb to stay on. Both Thomas Edison, the white guy, Lewis Latimer, the black guy, had to get outside of their comfort zones and realize that if they worked together, they could light the world. And that's what they did. Unfortunately, our textbooks and our history books do not give proper credit to Lewis Latimer. But those of us who understand what it is to get outside of the comfort zone, who understand what it is to really do what is necessary to bring light to the world, we must do it. And that, to me, is what is going to be required in this environment today. Get outside of your comfort zone. Don't hesitate to stick your neck out. Stay focused. Keep moving. And who knows? The world may light up one day. I don't believe anybody here today would have believed they would live to see Mitt Romney walk in a public demonstration and look into a camera and mouth, "I'm out here marching today because I believe that Black lives matter. Mitt Romney has gotten outside of his comfort zone like his daddy George before him. See, I'm old enough to remember George Romney, who left Lansing, Michigan and went and walked the streets of Detroit, Michigan after King's assassination. And it was George Romney from whom I learned early. I know that a lot of you may get a little nervous about that, but I did learn early from George Romney why it was necessary to sometimes look behind what people are presenting. When Romney stopped on the streets of Detroit to talk to people who were burning the place down, he wanted to find out what would make you do this? What brought you to Detroit? And he kept running across the little county in South Carolina, Williamsburg, the town of King Street, Greeleyville. And when he announced his ill-fated run for president, Romney made his first trip to South Carolina, and Strom Thurmond took him to King Street. And I'll never forget what he said that day. It was very instructive to me. He wanted to see what were these people running away from? What would make them leave home and go to a strange place like Detroit, Michigan? I would say to you all, your readers today, read Ms. Wilkerson's book, The Warmth of Other Suns, and you will get a much better understanding of what is going on in our inner cities today and why it is that we must use technology to penetrate rural communities throughout this country, to get broadband out there so they can have telehealth, to get broadband out there so they can have online learning, to get broadband out there so that they can be brought into the mainstream of this country's greatness. That, to me, is what our challenge is today.
That's very powerful. And I just, what I got out of that was so many things. Take a risk. I also got a new candidate for our Hall of Fame. I honestly did, even though I've been in my job for a long time, I did not know that story about the filament. So thank you for sharing that with me. But I also, the Romney connection and what you've done with Hollings and others is important. But you also have a phrase that you've been using. It's on your billboards, and you talk about making America's greatness accessible and affordable for all. What does that mean to you?
It means simply this. When I was growing up, we used to recite the pledge every morning, the Pledge of Allegiance. And it closes with a simple phrase, with liberty and justice for all. Over the years, I have tried to pursue what I call that value system, that vision for the country. And in pursuit of that vision, I've come up with all kinds of tools and always trying to make things a little bit better for those who are destined to come after us. And when I started doing research, as I often do every cycle, I would look and see what the headlines are, and I would look behind those headlines to see, can I find in our history. George Santayana admonished us that if we fail to learn the lessons of history, we are bound to repeat them. And so I go and look for history lessons. And so when I was getting ready year before last for the upcoming elections, I started rereading Alexis de Tocqueville's great book, or 2-volume book, Democracy in America, which I think were summed up, those 2 volumes are summed up in one sentence in that book. He said that America is not great because it is more enlightened than any other nation, but rather because it has always been able to repair its faults. That is what the greatness of America is, repairing our faults. COVID-19 has opened up a fault line, and the greatness of America requires that we repair the fault line in healthcare delivery, a fault line in education, a fault line in energy conservation and energy production. And so that billboard that I have established throughout my district simply says, our challenge is to make this country's greatness accessible and affordable for all. This is a great country. With all its faults, it's been a great country for a long time. We do not have to make this country great again. We have to make this country's greatness accessible and affordable for all. That's simple. You got a great healthcare system, a great educational system, a great energy producing system. We got it all, but it ain't accessible and affordable.
Well, you're in a position to do something. I mean, what you said is very powerful. You've just been made chair of the U.S. House Select Committee on the Coronavirus Crisis. Can you talk about the purpose of the committee and how you're going to attack the very problems you talked about?
Well, we are learning a whole lot from the similar committee that was set up back in 1941 that we call the Truman Committee. The Truman Committee was set up by Harry Truman, then a junior senator from Missouri. He went to the Senate, explained to the Senate that he thought that in preparation for rebuilding after World War II, we could learn from what the country did after World War I. And World War I, which ended in 1918, same year of the Spanish flu. So while we were trying to recover from World War I, we were being challenged with the Spanish flu, the worst pandemic that we've had until this one. And Truman convinced the Senate that this committee could do the work of 116 committees that were set up after World War I. So I'm studying the Truman Committee. Nancy Pelosi first approached me about this and said that she wanted to pattern it after the Truman Committee. She knew that I was a big fan of Harry Truman. She knew that I studied for Harry Truman, and that's studied Harry Truman. And I think that's the main reason she asked me to do this, because she wanted it to function like the Truman Committee. And all the research says that Truman's committee cost the country about $1 million, but returned to the country's coffers around $16 billion. And one study said they saved thousands of lives, especially the lives of little children. So I've been trying to pattern this. That's what I'm looking at, what we can do with this $2 trillion that we've already appropriated. This $3 trillion that the House has now passed. Some people say it's too much, but Chairman Powell, the chair of the Fed, says $3 trillion may not be enough. I don't know how much we're going to end up spending in order to overcome the effects of this virus. This virus is like the Spanish flu, but this racial problem we're having is little bit like World War I. So we had a double whammy back then, we got a double whammy now, and the question is, will Congress respond using the 3 E's that I've laid out? Will we be efficient in our response? Will we be effective in that response? And will we be equitable with our response? That's what this committee is doing. And I am going to do everything that I can to make sure that we carry that out for the people of this country, because we're going to get through this, but we got to get through it in such a way that we are better off as a result of it. You see, I'm old enough to remember the polio vaccine.
Me too.
When the polio vaccine came out, there were 2 big vaccines. A lot of people don't realize that. Jonas Salk came up with a vaccine it was the first one. There was a shot in the arm. Albert Sabin came up with a vaccine that was a little drop of serum on a lump of sugar. And I remember what happened with those vaccines. I was in the neighborhood where the shots went. The least effective and the least desired was to get a shot. The most effective and most desired was that serum on a lump of sugar that got into the stomach and was a much more effective deterrent to polio than the shot. The shots came to my neighborhood. The serum and the lump of sugar went across town to the white neighborhoods. Part of my job is to make sure that equity is employed right along with efficiency and effectiveness in carrying out my responsibilities with this committee.
So it's very forward-looking as well. One of the things you see with the coronavirus, there's a slight silver lining to the coronavirus cloud in terms of technology. We've seen it with telehealth, teleeducation, as well as telework. We've seen all these things just explode quickly. And I'm curious, do you think it's important that Congress try to reap the benefits of some of that, especially in the telehealth area, which allows doctors to work across state lines to get information from low-cost technology so older people especially don't have to come to the office as much and have caregivers take them? Is this going to cause a revolution in how we do things once we get past the physical challenge of this virus?
Absolutely. That's my dream. My late wife spent almost 30 years battling diabetes. I went with her one time to visit her doctor, and I watched her doctor sit at his desk in Columbia, South Carolina, and diagnose the ailments of a gentleman 126 miles away down in Beaufort County. Telehealth has got to be employed if we are going to deliver healthcare efficiently and effectively. We've got to have online learning if we are going to have our children. We don't know how long this pandemic is going to be out here. I'm convinced that the vaccine will not be here by Christmas. I'm not too sure when it could be here. Looking back on history, history tells me it's going to take much longer to come up with an efficient, effective vaccine than people are now declaring. So if we're going to do that, what are we going to do about the education of our children? And so, yes, broadband has got to be the order of the day going forward. Let me share with you a little testimony that I've been sharing with a lot of people. There was a story told when the co-ops, this rural electric co-ops, were developing their 50th anniversary of rural electrification. They came up with a tabletop book that they call The Next Greatest Thing. And the reason that book is called that is because way back in the 1940s, a gentleman, farmer down in rural Tennessee, stood up in church one night and said, brothers and sisters, let me tell you this. The greatest thing on earth is to have the love of God in your heart. But the next greatest thing is to have electricity in your house. I believe that the next greatest thing for the 21st century is to have broadband in every home. That will revolutionize healthcare and education and energy in this country. So I am pushing broadband. This $100 billion that we're going to vote on here tomorrow or the next day, I know there's going to be challenges to get it. We may not get it all this year, but I guarantee you that that expenditure is going to be made for this country to move forward. We're making all of its greatness accessible and affordable.
Absolutely. We're seeing that on our own Zoom call. You can see with our employees that are in areas that have broadband and those that don't. And it's a challenge. It's the haves and the have-nots even among our own employees, which is too bad. And I look forward to being fixed. I mean, in the early years of the Obama administration with the Democratic Congress, there were billions given for the same purpose. It only ended up getting a few thousand more people on broadband. What makes this effort different?
Well, I think that the scabs have been pulled back on healthcare. We didn't have the benefit of COVID-19. Now, y'all not call that a benefit, but the experience is a benefit. The experience, as I said, is a blessing for us. There's no benefit in seeing George Floyd lose his life, but it's instructive and it's turning out to be a blessing for all of us. So I believe that we were being short-sighted during the Obama years when it came to this. We were short-sighted. I can't tell you, it took me 6 years to get the Rural Energy Savings Program going. As much sense as that makes, it was 6 years to get them to approve that. I just believe that we're going to get this done simply because of the experiences people are now having. And we know now that certain things have got to be done that we did not do before. That if we are going to have a successful future for our children and our grandchildren, if we are going to leave this country in a better place than we found it, that's what's going to be required. If we don't do it, retrogression will set in, and we will find ourselves reliving history that we thought we had gotten beyond. So that's just simple as it gets.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, I know you have a full vote. I'm sorry.
There's a vote on that I'm about to miss. So
the final question is,
okay,
how do you want to be remembered?
He did his damnedest.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Congressman, for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you for your service to the country and your service in government. You've been phenomenal. I urge everyone to follow up. There's a lot of parts of the career, whether it's the burning down of your home or the challenges you had as the head of the Human Rights Commission in South Carolina and being fair and just. You've done so many things. You've led the way. You're an inspiration for public service. You're an inspiration to all of us about how to lead a good life and make a difference. So thank you all. It's been a great session, and I'm sure you're going to vote the right way.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Congressman Clyburn and Gary, for that fascinating discussion. Our next upcoming events in the series are Kay Coles James on July 7th and Corey Berry on July 29th. Registration is open on the NVTC website, nvtc.org. We hope to see you there. In the meantime, please stay safe and healthy and have a great rest of your day.